A 170-kilometer monument to human arrogance has just been violently slashed to a mere 2.4 kilometers, a staggering 98% collapse. That buries an $8.8 trillion fantasy under the unforgiving desert sand. Why does the catastrophic implosion of this Middle Eastern utopia matter to your everyday life? Because this isn't just about a failed real estate pitch. It is the ultimate stress test of global capital. It signals the terrifying end of an era where unlimited energy wealth was assumed to possess the power to bend the absolute laws of physics. This is a geopolitical shockwave that will inevitably ripple through the sovereign wealth funds and energy markets, dictating your personal financial security. If the wealthiest kingdom on earth cannot buy its way out of mathematical reality, the entire architecture of petrodollar dominance is shifting before our eyes. I am Daniel Mercer, and welcome back. Today, we look past the slick CGI renders to expose how the grandest mega project of our century is quietly devolving into the most expensive dirt trench in human history. The initial pitch, delivered in 2017, was intoxicatingly simple. $500 billion would buy a geometric utopia slicing through the desert. Yet, as the shovels hit the sand, the architects of this vision encountered a mathematical reality that no amount of sovereign wealth could paper over. By 2021, the budget was quietly revised to $1 trillion, but the true shockwave arrived with an internal assessment that leaked a catastrophic projection to complete the entire structure. The actual cost would inevitably surge to $8.8 trillion. Indeed, to comprehend the sheer absurdity of that figure, we must place it next to the hard fiscal limits of the global energy market. $8.8 trillion is not just a budget, it is an economic black hole. The entire annual fiscal revenue of Saudi Arabia cannot even cover the fractional remainder of this astronomical sum. Consider that the Public Investment Fund, the kingdom's premier sovereign wealth vehicle, manages roughly $900 billion in total global assets. This mega project alone demands nearly 10 times the entire accumulated wealth of that fund. We are looking at an undertaking requiring a capital injection that eclipses the combined gross domestic product of several major industrialized nations. Furthermore, this financial hemorrhage is colliding perfectly with a brutal macroeconomic headwind. The era of limitless petrodollar liquidity is facing unprecedented friction. Global oil prices have experienced sustained downward pressure, effectively carving a 24% crater into the kingdom's annual oil revenues. This revenue stream is the absolute lifeblood of the sovereign wealth engine tasked with bankrolling this desert utopia. Instead of writing blank checks, the fund is now adopting sudden austerity measures. We are seeing unprecedented reports of massive layoffs and salary reductions, sweeping through the very financial institutions supposed to fund this hyper city. You cannot finance a sci-fi metropolis when your primary treasury is desperately plugging its own structural leaks. Even if the kingdom were to liquidate every conceivable global asset, sell off immense stakes in state-owned energy giants, and empty its sovereign reserves to chase this $8.8 trillion white whale, the execution remains financially fatal. The global infrastructure market simply does not have the absorption capacity for this level of concentrated capital burn without triggering a catastrophic domestic debt crisis. Attempting to build an autonomous futuristic civilization entirely from scratch in an unforgiving wasteland is like trying to reverse gravity with a checkbook. Eventually, the physics of finance will relentlessly drag you back to earth. Ultimately, unlimited ambition becomes a geopolitical liability when it divorces itself from the unforgiving ledger of economic reality. Yet, even if the necessary capital could somehow be miraculously conjured from the shifting dunes, this mega project immediately collided with a far more unforgiving adversary: physics. The fundamental laws of thermodynamics and structural mechanics simply do not negotiate with sovereign wealth funds. Let us break down the sheer, terrifying scale of the structural engineering required just to keep this monument from sinking into the earth. To erect a continuous 500-meter-tall superstructure in the middle of a desert, you cannot rely on standard foundation techniques. The engineering teams were forced to design the most conservative and subsequently the most ruinously expensive piling foundation system ever conceived by modern civil engineering. They are attempting to drive reinforced concrete piles directly through highly unstable geological layers until they strike absolute bedrock. We are talking about pouring a massive, continuous raft foundation over a dense forest of subterranean concrete pillars. For just one single modular section of this city, engineers must drive over 5,500 piles deep into the earth. Extrapolate that across the initial development zone, and the total reaches a staggering 16,400 piles, with some penetrating up to 70 meters deep. To put that into perspective, the tallest building on the planet today relies on fewer than 200 piles to anchor its massive weight. This desert project is demanding the largest piling operation in recorded human history. It sounds undeniably triumphant on a presentation slide, but in reality, it is a process of literally burying billions of dollars into the dirt just to secure a basic structural foothold. Rather than conquering that subterranean abyss, stabilizing the foundation is merely the first impossible hurdle. Once the foundation is miraculously stabilized, the vertical ascent presents an entirely new set of physical nightmares. The architectural mandate demands that the entire exterior facade must be clad in a continuous wall of mirror glass. We are discussing 500-meter, high sheer walls of glass facing the brutal extremes of the desert climate. In these environments, ambient daytime temperatures can easily exceed 50 degrees Celsius, while the night brings a plunging, rapid drop in temperature. This extreme daily thermal expansion and contraction, combined with the catastrophic wind shear forces present at 500 meters above ground, creates an unsolvable structural paradox. The engineers are essentially tasked with guaranteeing that millions of square meters of glass will not shatter, warp, or detach under immense atmospheric stress. This is no longer merely a question of budget allocation or timeline management. It is a fundamental confrontation with the absolute limits of material science. You are essentially trying to forge a fragile glass fortress on a burning anvil of sand. The profound hubris of ignoring these environmental constraints exposes a critical flaw in the modern geopolitical playbook. When top-down political mandates attempt to overrule the laws of nature, the resulting structure is destined to fail before the concrete ever cures. Ultimately, gravity and thermodynamics remain the undefeated auditors of human ambition. Consequently, the initial cracks in the facade did not manifest as a spectacular collapse, but rather as a deafening silence across the construction zones. On September 16, 2025, the Public Investment Fund initiated a comprehensive suspension of the Linear City's core development. Officially, state media channels carefully avoided the vocabulary of failure, attempting to maintain an aura of control. However, in the unforgiving arena of global mega infrastructure, an indefinite pause is universally recognized as the polite geopolitical euphemism for a severe liquidity crisis. The authorities were quietly hitting the brakes, desperately attempting to manage the optics of a grand retreat, while the financial scaffolding buckled underneath. The true scale of this capitulation was fully exposed 6 months later. In March 2026, a critical subterranean tunneling contract valued at over $1 billion was abruptly and unilaterally terminated. This sudden cancellation sent immediate shockwaves through the international engineering supply chain. South Korea's Hyundai Engineering and Construction, a cornerstone partner in the foundational phase, found itself severely exposed, suddenly absorbing a monumental $483 million loss on a canceled mandate. This was not merely an administrative adjustment, it was a devastating financial contagion. Global contractors who had structured their decade-long revenue projections around the supposedly infallible promise of sovereign wealth were abruptly left holding breached contracts and stranded assets. Simultaneously, a massive hemorrhage of human capital was unfolding on the ground. Internal site intelligence and subcontractor reports revealed that since April 2025, the active construction workforce had plummeted by a staggering 35%. In the life cycle of a megaproject, a deliberate demobilization occurs only when critical infrastructure milestones are achieved. A 35% labor contraction mid-phase is an uncoordinated evacuation. It signals a chaotic environment where payrolls are freezing, supply lines are stalling, and heavy machinery is being abandoned to the blistering sun, because the capital required to fuel the operation has simply evaporated. This entire sequence illustrates the delicate, often humiliating choreography a nation must perform when forced to dramatically scale down a flagship national vision. The transition from aggressive, world-beating expansion to silent damage control requires dismantling a utopian narrative without triggering a total collapse in foreign investment confidence. Yet, the physical reality on the ground betrays the careful public relations strategy. When the artificial tide of infinite sovereign capital finally recedes, it does not leave behind a futuristic horizon. It exposes the jagged wreckage of broken promises and bleeding global contractors. Geopolitical credibility is ultimately measured not by the scale of the blueprints presented in an air-conditioned boardroom, but by the harsh arithmetic of the bills a nation can actually settle in the desert. Indeed, while the official narrative vehemently denies any form of permanent abandonment, the actions on the ground tell a fundamentally different story. A glance at recent high-resolution satellite telemetry strips away the remaining public relations illusions. Where the world was promised the gleaming, unbroken foundations of a 500-meter tall glass monolith, the orbital imagery reveals a starkly contrasting reality. There is only a parched, aggressively excavated dirt trench cutting blindly through the barren landscape, flanked merely by rows of temporary, corrugated steel housing meant for a rapidly dwindling labor force. In a desperate bid to salvage some modicum of utility from this colossal miscalculation, the original master blueprint is undergoing a radical, unannounced mutation. The remaining underdeveloped sectors of this mega project are no longer zoned for human habitation. The breathless vision of a bustling, futuristic metropolis, engineered to comfortably house 9 million residents, has been quietly scrapped. Instead, those barren tracts are being hastily repurposed into sprawling artificial intelligence data centers. Let us be absolutely clear about what this means. The most ambitious, glittering utopia of the 21st century has been severely downgraded into a glorified, heavily air-conditioned server farm. This abrupt pivot exposes a broader, frantic scramble currently gripping the entire region as the inevitable sunset of the global fossil fuel era accelerates. Traditional resource extraction economies are desperately attempting to buy their way into the architecture of tomorrow's technology sector. They are trading the volatile barrel of oil for the stability of silicon. Yet, throwing billions of dollars at advanced microchips and cooling systems cannot mask the profound structural failure of the original urban master plan. It is a textbook manifestation of a geopolitical wealth disease, the fatal, intoxicating delusion that overwhelming sovereign capital alone can artificially accelerate historical development. It is the belief that one can instantaneously clone the organic success of established global commercial hubs simply by issuing massive purchase orders, completely ignoring the necessary underlying economic ecosystem. They attempted to purchase a universe, class science fiction dream, only to discover that even the deepest pockets in the global energy market possess a definitive, unavoidable bottom. The great 170-kilometer monument to human triumph has violently contracted to a mere 2.4 kilometers of viable development. This is not merely a construction delay, it is a structural collapse of a geopolitical narrative. The grand glass walls were ultimately shattered not by the harsh desert winds, but by the crushing, inescapable weight of economic gravity. In the end, unlimited capital is merely a powerful amplifier. It can never successfully architect a reality that mathematics, physics, and basic market fundamentals explicitly forbid. The desert has always been a ruthless auditor of human ambition, stripping away the illusions of those who believe capital alone can conquer nature. As we watch this trillion-dollar mirage shrink into a mere fraction of its promise, we are reminded that true geopolitical power isn't built on slick renders and impossible architecture, but on the cold, hard alignment of resources, engineering, and economic gravity. Thank you for joining me in the study today. The mechanics of global power are always shifting, and we will be here to decode them. Until next time.